All right, we're coming off mute. New York, can you hear us?
Yes.
New York. Buffalo, can you hear us?
Yes.
All right. Well, this room works better than the other one. Okay. I'll call this meeting of the Code Council to order. This is the second meeting of the year. I appreciate everybody's accommodation in switching the date. Unfortunately, we had a little problem in 505 with our connection system, so they're working on it. Hopefully, by the next meeting, we'll have it back, since this is pretty tight quarters. So let's see. We have 9 today. So anything we do has to be unanimous, otherwise we can't do it, and we'll have to push it out to the next meeting. Candidates to fill the vacancies are working their way through the process. Unfortunately, that's just a long process, and we hope that it's soon, certainly by the next meeting. Let's see. Since we have 9 right here, right now, we'll have Gerard do a roll call in a second. We will go straight through the agenda. I am, however, going to pull agenda item 3 until the next meeting. All right. I think we're probably going to discuss that in a more global context with regard to the supplement. The next meeting will be the discussion of the proposed supplement. Staff is working long days, nights, and weekends to try and get that done. That's why they look so tired. All right. Gerard, why don't you call the roll so we make sure we have our 9 noted, and then we'll move on.
Designee for Secretary of State Rosado, Matt Devo.
I'm present.
Designee for State Fire Administrator Francis Neary, Ben Keller.
Present.
Designee for Commissioner Ruth Ann Wisnauskas of DHCR, Michael Weber.
Present.
Designee for Commissioner Roberta Reardon of Labor, Vincent Rappuccillo.
Here.
Designee for Honorable Bill de Blasio, Keith Wen.
Here.
Michael Sabatino,
Here.
Sean Hamlin,
Here.
Tim DeRuscher,
Here.
William Tyne.
Here.
That's a quorum with exactly 9.
Thank you, Gerard. Okay, continuing on in announcements, I'm actually going to, this is not an agenda item, but it's actually a good discussion point. I'm just going to ask Penny Oda to discuss briefly 2 of the actions taken by the Secretary, regulatory actions that affect the code, I guess, generally. Penny Oda?
Sure. We recently filed 2 notices of adoption. The first one we actually discussed, you might remember, back at the January 23rd, 2017 meeting, which was regarding the parking garage condition assessments. At that time, we had the sponsors of Bill A9614-A from 2016. That was Member of Assembly Donna Lupardo and Senator Thomas O'Mara that presented. And since that time, the Department of State further researched the topic, and we promulgated these new standards to be implemented throughout the state to require cities, towns, villages, counties, and state agencies that are responsible for administering and enforcing the Uniform Code to require the owners of parking garages to have periodic condition assessments of those parking garages performed by qualified professional engineers. That will become effective on August 29th when it appears in the state register. And that will amend Title 19 NYCRR Parts 1202, 1203, and 1204 respectively. The other notice of adoption that we filed, and we did discuss this, I believe it was maybe at our last meeting during the briefing notes, that the Executive Law 376-A was amended by Chapter 468 of the laws of 2017, and that requires us to, in essence, create this rule, which is going to implement that amendment to the statute to provide for investigation and then the suspension and or revocation of the certification of CEOs, code enforcement officials and building safety inspectors, BSIs, found after a hearing to have materially failed to uphold his or her code enforcement duties. And that will become effective August 22nd when it appears in the state register at that time. And that's going to amend Title 19 NYCRR subpart 1208-6 is the new subpart that's been added. Both of these notices of adoption will also have e-bulletins sent out in the near future, and that rule text will be posted on the department's website shortly.
Shortly.
Well, these things take time.
Okay. All set?
That's all we have.
Great. Thank you, Peniota. All right, moving to agenda item 2, adoption of the minutes of May 15th, 2018. You would have received this in your packet actually probably 3 or 4 weeks ago before the prior scheduled meeting. Are there any discussion points, any changes to the minutes? Okay, hearing none. All those in favor of adopting the minutes of Tuesday, May 15th, 2018, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? The minutes of May the 15th, 2018 are adopted unanimously. Thank God. All right, moving on. Yeah. Moving on to agenda item 4. This is 19 NYCRR, Part 1229, diaper changing stations. Peniota's going to introduce it, and then Nick is going to give us the detail. This is for a vote.
Okay, and this was one of the other items that was actually discussed at our last meeting during the briefing notes part. This is a recent law that was signed, Chapter 58 of the laws of 2018 on April 12th, and that amends Executive Law 378, new subdivisions 16 and 17, which provide for one diaper changing station to be accessible by both genders in all newly constructed buildings that have one or more areas classified as an assembly group A or mercantile group M occupancy, and in all existing buildings that have also A and M's that undergo a substantial renovation. And we worked on drafting this rule to implement that provision as well as the signage requirement. The law will become effective on January 1st, so it is important that we move forward with the notice of proposed rulemaking process. And Nick is going to give you the details about what the rule text says. You should have all received a copy of it prior to this meeting.
Nick?
So as Peniota stated, the rule requires diaper changing stations to be provided for male and female occupants on each floor level of newly constructed buildings that contain a public toilet room, which is intended to serve an area classified as an assembly group A occupancy or mercantile group M occupancy. The term public toilet room, which is defined in the rule text, is simply a restroom that is intended for use by customers of and visitors to an area classified as an A or an M. The term public toilet room includes a family or assisted use toilet room, unisex rooms, men's rooms, and women's rooms. In addition to newly constructed buildings, the draft rule requires existing buildings to have diaper changing stations installed when such building has or will have, after completion of a substantial renovation, one or more areas classified as a group A or M occupancy, but only when such building undergoes a substantial renovation. The term substantial renovation is defined by 5 categories of work. The first category is the construction of a new family or assisted use toilet room or a new unisex public toilet room. The second category is the construction of a new male public toilet room and a new female public toilet room that are located on the same floor level. Category 3 is a level 2 alteration of an existing family or assisted use toilet room, unisex public toilet room, or both a male public toilet room and a female public toilet room that are located on the same floor level. Category 4 is a level 3 alteration where the work area includes any existing public, family, or assisted use toilet room, an existing unisex public toilet room, or existing male public toilet room, and a female public toilet room that are both located on the same floor level. The fifth and final category is a level 2 or level 3 alteration, where the work area includes at least 50% of the area of an Assembly Group A or Mercantile Group M occupancy, and where a diaper changing station can be provided in an existing family or assisted use public toilet room, a unisex public toilet room, or a male public toilet room and female public toilet room that are both located on the same floor level without having to reconfigure the space in or increase the floor area of any such public toilet room. In addition to when and where diaper changing stations are required, the draft rule contains several requirements pertaining to the accessibility and construction requirements of the diaper changing stations. So I'm sure that everyone's seen these diaper changing stations, the wall-mounted ones in a restroom somewhere. So these commercially manufactured wall-mounted diaper changing stations shall be listed and labeled as complying with ASTM F2285. Both commercially manufactured wall-mounted and countertop diaper changing stations shall be installed in accordance with the manufacturer's instructions. Non-commercially manufactured diaper changing stations shall be constructed and installed in accordance with this rule, in addition to all applicable requirements of the Uniform Code. All diaper changing stations shall be designed for children weighing up to 50 pounds, be approved by the code enforcement official or authority having jurisdiction, and shall, at a minimum, comply with the accessibility requirements of Section 6035 of the 2009 ICCA 117.1. The rule will also require that each public toilet room that does not contain a diaper changing station to be provided with a sign indicating the location of the nearest station. The sign requirements apply to all Group A and M occupancies where at least one diaper changing station is installed on or after January 1st, 2019. This requirement applies even if a diaper changing station was installed voluntarily or pursuant to any other rule. The signs shall, at a minimum, comply with Section 703.2 of the 2009 ICCA 117.1. And finally, historic buildings are exempt from the requirements to have diaper changing stations installed, but are not exempt from the signage and maintenance requirements of the rule. So if a historic building just happens to have a diaper changing station installed, the rule will require a sign to be installed in all public toilet rooms that do not have the diaper changing station. So that's the summary. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Does anyone have any questions or comments regarding this rule of Nick or Peniota, or if you just want to speak? Anyone? Okay, seeing none. Nick, we're talking about a schedule that puts us, if we conceptually approve today, we're looking at the end of the month possibly, and then we're looking at a notice of adoption and an adoption by the Code Council in the December meeting? Okay. And then it will go live on January 1st with the law.
Yes.
Okay. Nick, what was the thinking behind the historic buildings exemption?
We exempt historic buildings in a lot of areas.
Okay.
So
Yeah,
it's-
the statute provides for, that we may do it for the actual installation, but it did not have the same language associated with the sign,
Okay,
which is why we did not include the historic exemption
great.
for the sign.
Okay. Enforcement will be by the local code enforcement. Okay. I mean, I'm noting the term safe, sanitary, and working conditions. That's all I am. Okay. All right, so what we're doing today is conceptual approval. Basically, we're just giving the department the ability to move forward with the notice of proposed rulemaking, which we will take up later in the year as a notice, as a final adoption after a
Public comment.
60-day public comment period. For this, we can actually just do a voice vote. So if there are no other questions, comments, etc., all those favor of granting the department conceptual approval to move forward with a notice of proposed rulemaking that looks either exactly or strikingly similar to the document you have in front of you, signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? It passes unanimously. You've got your conceptual approval. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, moving on to agenda item number 5. This is a progress report on the changes to the Uniform Code. We have 2 subparts here, one on habitable attics and one on the tiny homes appendix. Jeff is going to handle that for us today. So Jeff, off you go.
Thank you. Good morning. Hopefully you've had a chance to review the memorandum that we sent to you. The topic of habitable attics is not a new topic to this council. As the division has done our review on the 2018 I-codes, some other issues of concern, some have arisen from the review. Rather than read the memo to you, I will give you the highlights. The first thing is that the current allowance for a habitable attic in the IRC creates an inconsistency within the Uniform Code. And this inconsistency really lies into how the residential code views that space versus how the building code views that space. And so seeking to rectify that situation, as our attempt is to make these codes as consistent and uniform as possible, that we felt that needs to be looked at. What this also does in the second concern is that the creation of that space, while not considering a story, is potentially allowing an unmitigated life safety hazard in that space, that one code would treat it one way and the other would treat it another way. So as a summary of what the division would like to see us do is return to our historical precedents, which is to treat that space, if it truly is space that is being used to live in, to treat it as a story, and that would result in, it would be potentially a 4-story structure, which would then force that residential building to then have to be constructed under the building code rather than the residential code. And we tried to put together some illustrations to show different scenarios that you can come in to try to highlight the potential issues that are there. If you have any questions, we can field them.
So what we're really concerned about here is the 35-foot ladder. That's what's carried by, looking at the fire service representative, that's what's carried by the fire service generally, right?
In theory, yes.
In theory. In theory, that's the maximum. The maximum they're going to carry. And so, in theory, there are buildings being built right now under the residential code where that ladder will not reach the habitable attic. Okay.
There are a couple of other additional issues that, the emergency escape and rescue opening and the ladder height, but also the fact that you can build this and put people in it. And if you had to go to the building code, you'd have to use either a higher sprinkler system, higher form of sprinkler system, or a more restrictive building system.
Okay. Are there other questions, comments for Jeff or Gerard or Peniota?
So
Tim?
the essence of this is if it goes to a habitable attic, that becomes a 4th story. It no longer is in the residential code, goes to the building code. We end up with a stronger sprinkler system or different construction type.
Right.
That's in essence what we're saying.
Right.
Okay.
Now we're away from stick-built at that point, or are we?
Not necessarily. But you could be, let's see, I think you go to 4. Yeah, it can't be type 5 at all.
Which is still built with rated walls on the outside, so not a lot of difference.
Okay.
It really is back to the way it was previous to the last code.
Right.
So this was a shift, almost an inadvertent shift in the 2015?
Yes.
Well, for us,
Because they created
Yep.
for us.
a habitable attic.
Okay.
We didn't have it before.
Any other questions? Comments? Okay. Jeff, why don't you move on to tiny homes?
Try to keep this one tiny. Oh, I know. It's a short memo. I won't read it, but to summarize it, Appendix Q was added by industry advocates to the I-codes to create and provide guidance for safe, code-compliant, smaller dwellings. Tiny homes are not new to building. New England is covered with them. But what this was trying to do was provide specific relief, particularly in lofts, creating a loft space that was separate from what would be considered a mezzanine or something else that allows them to use ship's ladders and those type of devices as egress elements. And so the scope of it is very narrow to what structures can use these. It does not, it should be noted, address the issue of tiny homes on wheels specifically, which are being popularized on television programs and internet websites. But this would be we feel, a useful step forward in bringing these structures to compliance and encouraging their use where it's actually beneficial. So right now, the division recommends that the council adopt Appendix Q with minimal revisions, and at the same time, the division would develop a technical bulletin to help color out any gray areas or spots where there needs to be clarification.
Minimal revisions. We're just making the clarification that this doesn't deal with tiny homes on wheels, right? That's
our intention, is to just make sure that that's called out specifically.
But otherwise, we're taking it directly from ICC.
Correct.
Okay. Is this, I know you guys did some research on this, so I just want to bring this up for the Code Council. Is this still a thing? I mean, are we still getting these things built in New York?
It's
I mean, I watch TV.
Right. It can be a difficult thing to grasp because a lot of construction in this type is occurring, illegally, we'll say, not getting permits. The intention of some of these, especially on wheels, is that they can move around and skirt zoning laws and things of that nature. And so it's hard to get a good grasp on those numbers because it's all whatever the user offers to the public to say what they're doing. We did field a call from New York City's planning department who was asking about this appendix. And so I think city planners and different individuals who are passionate about that are looking to this as a solution. And when they see this information coming up, it may be an option for those things. And I think that's where the interest is right now, is that whether it's still a thing with the public is probably up for debate.
Okay. Are there any other questions, Tim?
Just a quick question. Do you know if Appendix Q addresses tiny homes in proximity from one to the other?
That would all still fall under the regular code. The only provisions that Appendix Q addresses will be the loft and the emergency rescue openings. And so all the rest of the code would still come into effect.
Sure. In fact, right at the beginning of the rule, it identifies that they have to meet the code except for these exceptions.
Yeah, I guess I would ask the question that if it's on the same property, that you have a lot of these small homes in very close proximity to one another, as in many type of things, how is that going to be addressed? It's good to give guidance about the actual individual small home, but what happens when they're all, I'm going to say compactly put together, because that's the objective, I would think.
Cluster.
The cluster, yeah, whatever you want to call it, on the same parcel, so that becomes,
They
guess
still-
what,
they
I'm still
still-
underneath X amount of square feet for a type 5 wood frame building. How are we going to deal with that? Is that something that the supplement should maybe take a look at? Just a question.
Well, they still should meet the same separation distance of any other house, because the rest of the code still applies. And what we were going to try to do with a technical bulletin is to help clarify, especially for code enforcement, regarding a lot of enforcement questions that come up about tiny homes.
We could certainly include that as part of one of the items. just to clarify. I mean, there's going to be a lot of things that we're going to have to
That
clarify.
represents the significant
Yeah.
fire problem. I mean,
Right.
It's not the individual home itself.
Right.
And whether or not someone would go through and say, I have 15 of them and 15 times 300, I'm underneath my square footage, so therefore it's one building. I mean, there's just different ways
Yeah.
to angle that, that's all.
That's one of the challenges with this issue is that there's a zoning piece that we don't regulate. And so we can only do so much. And we'll have to see as communities face this, that they're going to have to think on some of those issues on their own of how they're going to handle those kind of situations.
Okay.
So again, Tim, you're talking about many units on the same lot, not
Yes.
individual lots.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah, because now you have lot lines and parcels that have other requirements for how close you can build to it, et cetera. But if you're not in that, you have one large parcel.
Right. Well, you still have the,
That
you
becomes-
still have the imaginary line when they're on the same. And if you really did try to treat a number of those as one building, like you could, then you might end up being an R2 actually. Because you're treating it as one building and they would have to do other things because of
Yes.
that.
Yeah, maybe that would be a good way to do some guidance, discussions, and frequently asked questions or something like that.
Are
Thank
there
you.
other, oh, go ahead, Tim.
No, thank you.
Okay. Are there other questions, comments?
I have a question. It's Keith here in New York. Hi. The question is about, are we going to treat these similar to prefabricated homes that are subject to New York State inspections? In terms of, I believe, prefabricated homes are supposed to be inspected at the factory or having some sort of certification. Are we going to address that issue as well?
I believe right now, since they fall under the rest of the code, that if somebody is building this off-site for delivery, they would have to follow that program. Just like our modular homes, anything like that. And that's where the burden will be on us to educate and for local code enforcement officers to be aware that there are these programs that they will have to follow. As of today, that is how they would have to build these. If they were going to build one off-site, it would have to be through us, and they would, just like a modular home, anything like that, it's what we would expect it to follow.
They could be actually built voluntarily under a HUD program if they did that too. Even though HUD doesn't require it under that the smaller square footage, it can voluntarily be done under HUD. And the modular manufacturers, there actually are, I believe, a couple of them at least who have in their system homes that would be small enough to fit into that category already approved. I don't know how many of them they build, but there are some approved that are near that size.
Yeah, I think it would be nice if the FAQ is going to address some of these questions.
Yeah, that would be the intention, is we would try to highlight those kind of questions and things so that people, we try to come up with what are the ways people will want to construct these dwellings and then try to structure the bulletin such that it kind of brings all that information to light and presents it in a clear way.
Sounds good.
Thanks, Keith. Anybody else?
Just one question. Does the ownership structure ever factor in? So like in the example of a cluster of these, right, whether it's a cluster of individual, single-family, individually owned homes, as opposed to a cluster of homes organized as a cooperative? As to whether it's treated as a single
I would.
entity or, not like a single multi-family development as opposed to a series of single.
I think that would be a zoning answer, and then that would push whether it can be the residential code or the building code then. Because if it is a true multi-family with one owner and they're leasing, whether it's a lot or something like that, then Appendix Q probably wouldn't actually necessarily apply to them, depending how many they would put into a place. But those are, Yeah.
But they'd be all individual, single-family units. They'd all have independent living facilities in each
Right.
unit.
I ask because there's a push of with some of the manufactured home park to
Right.
to allow some of the tenants to organize as cooperatives.
Yeah, we would have to make sure we look into those things. We know that there are,
But would each unit have its own independent living facilities, the bathroom, the kitchen?
Yeah.
So
that's what we'll control.
Yes, so that point they'd be just, I guess, just as well, not just any other home, it's just, I guess, how they would use it. Whether it be a cooperative or what, I guess we'd have to look at that specific town. Individual homes would still comply with the code.
Okay.
Part of it too is, again, it's zoning, is how they're gonna use it. If they build one on wheels and pull it in there and use it like a recreational vehicle or a seasonal use vehicle, there's probably no reason they can't be pulled in there and be under pretty similar rules as the rest of the park models and that kind of thing. I mean, I'm throwing this out there, we definitely have to look into it a little deeper, but the key is if somebody's using it as a permanent home and they're setting it up, you know, with permanent sewer, water, and permanent hookups, then regardless if it's on wheels or on a permanent foundation, it should be looked at as a single-family home and meet the siding, foundation, hold downs, all of that.
Are there any other questions, comments, concerns?
Just a comment from Buffalo. I don't really see why the form of ownership would have anything to do with the construction standards. Issues of use, those are more germane, but I really don't understand why the form of ownership would have anything to do with how you build it.
Okay. Okay. Thanks, Bill. Any other?
Welcome.
Got me. Anybody else? Oh, hot topic today. Okay. All right. And I guess we're done. Thank you, Jeff. That was excellent. Okay, moving on to Agenda 6, the public comment period. I have a note in front of me that Chief Parsons from the City of Ithaca would like to address the council. Chief, you want to come up here?
Wherever.
I want to make sure they can hear you in New York City and they can hear you on the...
You know what? Why don't I let you sit right here?
Okay.
I'll switch seats with you.
Thank you for your time. I understand next month you'll be reviewing the adoption of the 2018 standards for New York State and considering the 2018 I-codes. One of the changes that I'm aware of that is in 2018 I-codes is changes of reference standards. One of the reference standards is NFPA 14, which is the standard by which standpipes are installed and tested as an initial installation. In New York State, standpipes are required for buildings for the highest occupied levels over 30 feet, unsprinklered assembly occupancies over 1,000, and tall buildings, obviously high rises, but manual standpipe systems in as far as high as 150 feet in garages and covered mall buildings. One of the changes in the 2016 NFPA 14 that says that the flow testing of standpipe system required by 11.51 shall be permitted to be waived where acceptable by the AHJ. I can tell you from at least 10 years of experience of testing standpipe systems, manual and automatic in my community, the design and the performance of standpipes is irregular at best, and primarily due to the difference between what's designed and what's actually installed. And I can tell you there are more than a number of engineers I've spoken to said that's not what I designed, but what was installed, unfortunately, didn't meet the design standard. And it was only discovered when we actually got into the flow testing to find that there were deficiencies. Flow testing is critical from the fire service standpoint, and that is the only verification that standpipe systems, when they're installed, are designed appropriately to supply the required amount of water to the floor or level of area where a fire may occur. Even in sprinkler buildings, standpipe systems are critical because it is another level or backup protection if in case the sprinkler system failed. One of my concerns in New York State in general is that speaking with my peers, fire chiefs, and code enforcement officials, it is probably the least enforced aspect of fire protection in New York State. Standpipe design, standpipe flow and performance. As I said, we've been doing this in Ithaca for 10 years, and for the first 8 years of it, we were probably failing 1 in 4 or 2 in 4. That's how deficient it was. In Ithaca, everybody kind of knows that we're going to test it, and we'll determine if it's going to pass or fail by its actual performance. And quite often, the problem is during installation, the fitters have to go around things that were not in the plans. And simply put, every 90-degree turn you put in a 4-inch piece of pipe or a 6-inch piece of pipe adds 7 additional feet. We've seen pipe equivalent. We've seen systems with 200 feet of additional pipe equivalent above the design. These systems fail. And if it wasn't for our testing, they would not be determined. So I ask at this moment just consideration of limitation in the adoption of 2018 to require that all standpipes designed and installed be flow tested, and that this exemption put in NFPA 14 not be allowed to be waived by the local AHJs. Thank you.
Thanks, Chief. Does anyone have, before you run away, does anyone have any questions for the Chief?
To your knowledge, why was it exempt again?
I have no idea why NFPA exempted it, to be honest with you.
This is just the new 2016 or in prior versions?
Nope, just in 2016 it was added.
So you're saying if we go ahead and adopt NFPA 14 to strike that language out or have additional language in the supplement stating that you shall test all standpipes?
Yes, flow test.
Flow test.
Yes. Yeah, and I think it would be useful to some education to code enforcement officials because I see not in so much big cities, but it could be in bigger cities, but it's certainly in the suburban areas where the fire service is engaged in code enforcement or overseeing fire protection system installations, that it could be lost. And local code enforcement officials, this is not necessarily in their expertise, in their wheelhouse. Quite often they rely on the engineer to design a system. They look at the calculations. They look for the stamp and say, it's okay. But when you're going out and actually inspecting the systems, if you're doing a diligent job and making sure that the fitting count is correct, you might catch it, but quite often it's not. The biggest thing I can share with you, the next time you're in your community and you go by the local hotel motel that's been built in the last few years, and you look for the fire department connection where the hose valves are, if it's 4 stories and it's a long building, chances are it has 2 standpipes. It requires 750 gallons a minute. If it has 2 small connections, it was not built to code. It's required to 3, unless it has one big large one. But it's the most common it's a common oversight by many code enforcement officials. They don't understand it. Unfortunately, it's not found until we actually get into a real fire situation, unless it's pre-tested. Thank you.
Thanks, Chief. Are there any other members of the public who would like to be heard by the Code Council today?
I think we have a lady in Buffalo who would like to address the council.
Thank you so much. My name is Sonia Duza. This is my first attending of this council's meeting, and I would like to respectfully give a shout out, a thank you to the Department of State, its staff, New York State Fire Prevention and Building Code Council on the amendment of 19 New York Code Schools and Regulations, subpart 1208-6, for its being proposed and adopted. This has been sorely needed. It gives teeth and accountability to that code rule, statute, and I cannot tell you enough how it is appreciated. Thank you so much to all who was responsible for its adoption. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Are there any other member of the public who would like to speak today?
Hi.
Hi.
It's Dottie Harris of the International Code Council. I had whispered to Nick, but I guess I'll tell everyone. In regards to the tiny home provision, I just wanted to let you know that tomorrow Massachusetts will be considering that amendment, that appendices, to add it to theirs in advance of the 2018 adoption, which they still haven't completely decided if they're adopting. They're going to discuss it tomorrow. They have to, by law, adopt the energy code. They're kind of debating the issue, but the tiny home provision appendices is being probably voted on tomorrow. So just thought I'd let you know that you're in good company to talk about those issues.
Thanks, Dottie.
Sure.
Anyone else? All right, seeing none, moving to Agenda 7, future meetings. Right now, we're scheduled for the 18th, I believe, of September. I have a feeling that we're probably going to push that back a couple of weeks to give these guys, time to sleep, so that they can have a supplement ready for us for discussion at the next meeting. I have a feeling our next meeting may be a tad longer, maybe some longer discussions around that supplement proposal. So members of the council, please look for an email from Gerard with potential dates in, like I said, early to mid-October. The last meeting of the year is what, December 5th, right? December 5th is the last meeting of the year. Like I said, we will be adopting the diaper changing stations requirement at that point. Is there any other business to come before the council today?
I just had a quick note for, Andy, are you present in Buffalo?
Yes. Say it again.
Andy, could you get some, some information from Sonia, who just spoke?
Okay.
See if she's got anything written that she can leave with us, name and info, just for our record. So Jim, you can send that to me later.
Will do.
Thank you.
Okay. Hearing no other business to come before the council. Oh, Tim.
Just a question, is the supplement that's being proposed is specifically regarding the 2018 high codes with the other documents that have been passed around to date, little charts and those kind of things, yes.
Yes.
So basic question is, that primarily shows the changes that have occurred from the current 2015 versus the 18. Right. So my question is this, are we maintaining the other provisions and revisions that have occurred in the 2015, 2017 state supplement, or are we starting with the ICC as the base and then, in other words, are the changes that have currently in effect, are those being brought up for discussion, or is it just the changes from one code to the other?
So much of what is contained in the supplement is required by statute 378. So a lot of those items are being pulled forward. Some things that are not specifically required by statute is the solar provisions. We're taking a second look at it to see if we can modify in some way, shape, or form. But the carbon monoxide provisions, they are statutorily required, and we do have a draft in the works that we're still trying to tweak, hoping to replace those regulations. So it'll still meet statute. It'll still be the supplement, but it might be a slightly version of what is in there today. There's some other things that NISBA commented on with the last go-around, some things, why they're necessary. I think it was portable smoke alarms for deaf and hearing impaired. It's required by statute, but if there's a better way to prevent it, we might go that route. Also, I think there were some owner-occupied provisions that we had carried forward with the 16th supplement. We missed a few of the 17th supplement, and I believe Department of Health found another couple that we missed. So we're trying to clean everything up. But the 17th supplement that's in effect today, that is the base document going forward for the future 2019 supplement. So a bunch of what's in there right now will be carried forward. Some of it will be tweaked. Some of it might just be verbatim because it's statutorily required.
But if there's anything deleted, we're gonna note that.
Oh, yes.
So that's a
Well,
change, that's a change just as well as an
Yes,
addition.
what we have right now, you can find on our website, we have a redline version of the 16 to 17 supplements that shows everything. So we would do the same thing. We present a redline version of the 17 to the future supplement, just as like an FYI, show people how it changed, but then we'd also have the actual enforceable, clean 2019 supplement.
So what we're expecting to see and receive is the current 17 supplement with revision, red lines, underlines.
Track
in it,
changes, yes.
So that we would see that
Yes.
prior to our
Yes.
next meeting, so we can understand what we're looking at.
Yes. The goal for staff is going to be get that to the council a week or more in advance so that the council has time to review. I would like a robust discussion and not just a.
So just for clarity, because I sometimes don't get things, the 2017 supplement is the starting point along with the 18 revisions that end up with
Yes.
Yes.
the piece that we'll be looking at.
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other business? Hearing none, I will move to adjourn the meeting of today, August 13th, 2018, at apparently 11:30. So moved by Tim, seconded by Sean. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? We are done. Thank you all for coming. Thank you all for your patience. Thank you all for your cooperation in moving rooms and moving schedules to try and make this work. I appreciate it. I don't need a gavel. Please don't give me a gavel. Good night, York. Good night, Buffalo.
I've heard